As the GDMA, over the last 2 years, we've worked on the global privacy principles and we've worked on the attitudes. What the privacy principles encapsulates is, is saying, in simple terms, and really bringing it and breaking it down. Let's look beyond the complexities of POPIA or the GDPR, and let's say what as humans can we do to navigate our digital marketing spheres. And what we've come up with are the basic human principles of, and I'll touch on those. Privacy principles talks about, putting the consumer at the center, building that trust, and behaving in a values-based and a principles-based way. And that's the privacy principles. When we get on to the other technical piece of research we did, and that's the attitudes. Now that is jam-packed full of real insights and data, numbers and graphs. They talk about the consumer over a journey of 20 years. They give us the insights of putting the consumer into 3 different categories. Being an uninterested, being the middle of the road, and being a fundamentalist, meaning those guys that are so concerned about where their data lands. The middle of the roaders, meaning they would look at the trust issue and how secure the data will be. And then there's the new generation that says, if somebody gives me a free game, I'll give them my data, or I'm okay sharing my data. But it goes into more complex research, and I think that'll be very interesting for all of us to have a look at. The new technologies and the use of personal data provides humanity with the opportunity to live better, consume better, and to be more sustainable. The benefits of data for society and the economy can only be achieved through its ethical use and the generating of trust between individuals and organizations. Data has an ever-increasing role in this quest for business, innovation, and economic growth. Privacy and data protection rules contribute to the creation of trust while providing a framework for responsible free flows of information across the world. The GDMA Global Principles establishes a worldwide framework for customers' communication that should underpin all legal and commercial approaches. They are designed as an instrument of best practice, and they are intended to serve as a guide for self-regulation. The global privacy principles are aspirational commitments for organizations and governments. We've entrenched legally what we should do, but we should inspire to a higher behavior, to a more professional behavior. Because, we don't want to be just at the bottom of the rung. We want to go for those moonshots. We want to go higher. That's the only way we're going to control and manage our own ecosystem in a healthy manner. And I think that's what sets us really apart as the DMA. We have a very healthy relationship with our regulator, with IR. We have not come in to argue that we're coming in at the basic part of regulation. We said, no, we will meet the regulation, but we will improve on it, because that's who we are. We can see it in the way we behave and act. And just to bring your attention to our complaints department, I talk to many of my members, and we send these reports onto the NCC's office and to the regulator's office. The biggest part of our complaints, if you look on our pie chart, 51% plus, is non-members. Our members that have taken up, the mantle of coming to the DMA show true compliance, but not just compliance at the basic level. They want their brand to stand head and shoulders above everyone else. And that's what's going to get your institution to live to 100 years. I mean, if you're going to be a flash in the pan, it's going to show. And you're going to get a call from our office, and you're going to get irate consumers that are going to put you on all the negative platforms. The principles that we drive and adhere to go beyond basic. These principles ensure that organizations across the globe put individuals at the heart of everything they do, so that organizations can be trusted, respected, and ultimately sustained in all countries. And that's exactly what we're saying and we see in all the research that we do. So how do these, the 7 principles impact us? The principles of value, number 1, value privacy. It's important that we value privacy, and I think I'm talking to the choir here. Members that join the DMA, we go through a robust process. Many of my board members that are sitting here, I give them a lot of work. When a member comes on board, we say, with Marina, let's take them to the ITC for the initial test. Are they a real company? Do they have a CIPC document? Do they have bona fide directors? So we know that you exist within the legal framework of what constitutes a company. It goes further on, with our directors to look at what's happened. Are there any complaints? I go into the database of our complaints department. Are you managing yourself well, or are you, let's say, a rogue company? And we are not going to let you into the DMA if you don't commit, or you don't have a track record, or you're not legally constituted. So there are checks and balances. Nobody just becomes a member. And that's what sets us apart. We value privacy, so we have to value the quality of the people that we bring on board, that we give the stamp of approval to. So, and in your institutions, valuing privacy is just as important. Be clear and transparent. That goes without saying. It goes to the heart of trust. If you cannot, and your disclaimers as well as all the checks on your websites, when you take someone's data, you tell them what you're going to do with it up front. You keep the legalese out of it. You speak to them in plain language, and you can build that trust. Respect individuals' preferences. That blanket opt-out and those sneaky pre-checks, check boxes, no, that doesn't fly anymore. That's easy to see. And consumers are smarter than that. So don't even play in that sphere. It will come back to bite you. Take responsibility. And here again, I'm always going to bring it back to the basic principles of what we see at the coalface. Consumers complain, they get to our complaints department. We take the consumer's complaint seriously, we lodge it, we then get the company that has upset the consumer to come on the phone line, or we do a collaborative talk. So the consumer's on one end, you as a company on the other end, and we stand in the middle and we say, here's an offense, they feel offended, what fixes can we put in place? And we actually do look at the act, and we correct the behavior. So one thing I must say, our members take responsibility. They come on the phone and they say, they give us all the stamps, all the date stamps, they show us the ad that went out, and then we look at it and we show the consumer, guys, these are all the necessary steps Poppy has asked for. Our member has complied. You still feel aggrieved. A lot of the time we find it comes down to education. Consumers have heard some crazy notion that they can sue, or they have so much power that they're going to close down the marketing of the whole world because somebody called them. Now, it's not that trivial. We do respect the consumer's right, but we have to say to the consumer, look, Section 69 allows us to call you and ask for your permission to talk to you. So that's what we do. If we're not allowed to do that, can you imagine how many unemployed youth there would be? Can you imagine that we would close down Woolworths, we would close down your shopping center, we'd close down all the centers that are convenient for you. So we do act within the ambit of the law, and the consumer then gets to be educated in terms of their rights. And if there is a true infringement, then we go back to the company and say, perhaps you should behave in this manner and correct your behavior. And both consumer and business then find a place where they reconcile. And I think for us, 50% of the battle is won when you pick up the phone and you address the consumer's concern. Do not let it go unaddressed. When the consumer calls the DMA, we pick up that phone. And that already brings down that irate level, because they know they have someone on their side. And I think that's how we're winning them over. And that's a service we give back to you. And that's exactly what you pay for. Keep personal data secure. What you're going to see in the future is that at the DMA, we're going to get very stringent on compliance. I spoke initially about the checks that we would have before we bring you into the DMA. But now as DMA members, we're shifting gears. A lot of the time, some of my colleagues are saying, oh, we've babied the industry too much. The industry has been crawling. It's now walking. It's ready to run. We have to balance what we do at the DMA. And I always say, look, we change attitudes at the DMA. We change behaviors at the DMA. But we're moving into another gear. We are going to stipulate there are certain non-negotiables. And we have to get to that point. So keeping personal data secure, we do not want to see data breaches as they are popping up today. And we're getting serious on it. We are going to insist that you're going to start either an annual a penetration test, you're going to send us that certificate, or we are going to get our a consultant to run that test for you. Because we can't have people using password as password. We can't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 securing people's personal files. We need to do a pen test. We need to see your certificate that you have a pen test on data. We cannot allow it anymore that we just take it at face value, because it's not working. And I think we're all in the same boat on that one. Some of us are doing it, and the others expose us, but we're all painted with the same brush. So that's why we have to take a hard stance. And that's going to become part of our next phase, in saying either you're going to show us this, and we'll start a register of saying our members have all done a pen test. The SSL certificates are up to date. They are running software that secures bases. They've got the necessary tools in place. And I think that will go a long way in keeping us independent and having the regulator allow us to get on with the business of what we do instead of imposing harder, draconian rule on us. So this is something we need to be doing, and we will be doing it in the future. To be accountable, I think members that do come onto the DMA, they have assigned to our code, and we don't have any. I haven't had major issues with our members in terms of their accountability. When asked to stand up and when asked to explain, they do it. They do it willingly. In fact, they send their lawyers to show us how they comply. They give us all their compliance documents when we ask for it. And I must say, it really bodes well for us as an institution who can get that done. So there's a lot that I'm really happy and grateful for in the industry, but there's a lot of work that we still have to do going forward.
What's important about agency scope is the size of our sample. So every year since we've been doing it, which has been since 2016, we've managed to increase the size of our sample significantly. So I just want to show you that first. And as you can see, it's increased each time. And the most important thing that we do is talk to marketers. And these are the companies that we talk to. You can imagine that maybe 6 years ago when we started this, nobody knew who Scopen was. We wanted to speak to the top CMOs in the country. So we really had to work hard to persuade them to first participate. But it's been wonderful since then. And in fact, these days, when I send out a note, we do this every 2 years, when I send out a note to them to say we're going to be booking them for an interview, they respond very quickly. So that's a big achievement, I think. We then analyze creative agencies and media agencies. They're analyzed according to number of mentions. A bit more detail about what is the split of these marketers and how have they grown over the years in terms of decision makers. We have to be talking to the decision makers. We can't be talking to a level too low that doesn't necessarily make the decision. So they are people who make decisions about advertising and communications, PR, digital, media on a daily basis. But they are in a senior enough position to make those decisions, and also in a senior enough position to be part of the decision-making process of changing an agency if necessary. The creative agencies and the media agencies that we interview, first of all, let me just say, before I go on to that, the marketers' interviews are very important. They are face-to-face. They're at least an hour long, whereas the creative agency and media agency interviews are much shorter. It's 10 minutes, and it's an online questionnaire. They're very important, but it's really important for us as Agency Scope to get the marketer's viewpoint. And then this year, in the 2021-2022 study, for the first time, we also spoke to media owners. Again, a very important part of the ecosystem, because we need to know how media owners are thinking, and particularly in the last 2 years of the pandemic. So our interviews and research, the fieldwork was conducted at the height of the pandemic last year. So all of our interviews were virtual. And did it make it easier? Yes and no. We do know that marketers enjoy having the sessions with us and our very experienced researchers, because they can then actually download how they're really feeling about the industry and the challenges they're facing. It's not just about how do they choose their agencies, it's about what they are facing as marketers. One of the important questions is what are they spending? And we're probably the only people who really know how much corporates are spending, because nobody else really gets the whole picture. And we look at what they're spending in relation to their sales turnover, which is very important for us. And you can see that, in fact, in 2019, which was because we do the study every 2 years, things had increased quite a bit from the previous period, tended to flatten out a little bit, no surprise to any of us, over 2021. How does that split? How do they spend it? This is a very important part in terms of, particularly in terms of what's happening with digital. So you can see that if you look at the digital split, you can see how that is split out over the various aspects of digital and where the growth has been. And if you look at the chart on the left, then you can see how digital takes its place in the whole expenditure of marketers, and how that has grown in the last 6 years in particular, and where it's headed. So you can see there was a dip, in fact, for above line in 2019, but it came back up again a little bit, but it is nowhere near where it was in terms of percentage. And you can see how digital has grown. And what we're projecting is that probably by the next time we do it, which will be 2023, digital will have grown even more, because in some countries, as we note there, it's at 60%. So we still, although it's grown quickly in South Africa, we still are a little way behind. Another interesting thing, which is really important for everybody to know, is the number of different agency and partners that marketers are working with. On average, about 13, which is a huge number. And how are marketers managing all of this? Because the marketing teams have actually shrunk in the last few years. We work with marketers all the time, so we know the pressures that they're under. Working with such a huge number of agencies or agency partners, including digital platforms, is quite a strain, quite stressful, and needs to be managed. But on average, it's 13. So you can imagine with some of the big marketers, it's probably closer to 20. Whereas some of the smaller marketers, it's probably closer to maybe 3 or 4. On average, it's about 4. What type of agency do you want to work with? I think this is important, particularly in this forum, to see that large marketers actually prefer working with specialist agencies, because they need to have the specialist expertise, particularly in the area of digital, direct marketing, to ensure that their brands are reaching who they need to reach. And who do they want to work with in the future? Definitely more specialization. I think that's good news. I think the opportunity for expertise in specialist areas is really important in this market, and actually is following what global trends are. We do this study in 12 countries. So over the course of a 2-year period, we're talking to close on 3,000 marketers globally. Then we go on to talk to them about, so when you're selecting an agency, what are you looking for? And this is very important in terms of how they select. Of course, innovation, creativity, how do they do it? Is it done through a pitch? Mainly, yes. Unfortunately, pitch, well, it isn't. It's fortunate and it's less fortunate. What's interesting in the last couple of years is the growth in workshops and also in trial projects. And we often say to agencies, the way to actually work with a marketer is to possibly start off small. Those big, large pitch processes are a bit of a beauty contest, and not necessarily stable enough for sustainability. So getting a project is a way in, and then building up from there. How do we compare to the rest of the world? Very important for us here in South Africa to look at what are the trends globally so that we can see what is happening. And then we go on to various other things in terms of what do they look for in a pitch process, and you can see the top 3 things are the strategic strength of the agency, very, very important, and has become more important in the last 2 years because marketing teams have been shrinking. Creativity, yes, and then the people. The level of quality of people for marketers to work with in agencies is critically important. Procurement. Anybody here from procurement? How important is the procurement department? The procurement department increases in its importance and has done over the last 6 years. What is happening in the rest of the world? And then how long are relationships generally? So if you look across this one, you can see particularly how marketers are looking at their relationships. The smaller the company tend to have shorter relationships. When we go across the world, in fact, South Africa is on average with the rest of the world. In terms of remuneration, is remuneration, is there a bonus factor? Surprisingly, yes, there is, and it actually has gone up a little bit in with certain marketers. We're never quite sure whether that's great practice or not. And the working dynamics, there again, looking really at holding groups, and another very important factor that came out, which is this one here, is about do marketers prefer to work directly with digital platforms, or do they prefer to work through their agencies who will then aggregate and recommend? The majority of marketers prefer their agencies to do the aggregation. In terms of awards, which awards are important to marketers? And these are the ones that come up. And you can see that, of course, there is a mention for the DMASA guys. We also think that these figures will change next year or in 2 years' time, because Apex and Effie's is now one. Nowhere else in the Scopen world does a local awards program come up before Cannes. In most countries, the Cannes Lions are the most popular awards program. But here in South Africa, the Loeries is preeminent. We find out who are the top most admired marketing professionals by other marketers. This is the top 10. Some of them you will know. We find out who are the most admired creative agencies, professionals, and media agencies. Then it's about the brands. Which are the most best campaigns? And then we compare that to global. And it's interesting to see that many of the top brands in South Africa are South African brands. The most respected companies for their marketing, Nando's, way ahead of anybody else. Very interesting. Top threes in the various areas: spontaneous awareness, creativity, ideal, attraction. So attractive is which agency would you shortlist, okay? And ideal is which agency would you marry? So that's... For the first time in 2021, we also did some additional work on what does the ideal client look like. So we asked agencies, how do you define an ideal client? It's obviously, they want to be considered as a partner. They're open to risk, tricky at times like this. And then some other statistics. And then some ideal client rankings, the attributes that agency professionals evaluate. Interestingly, in South Africa, and I think it's probably a global thing, marketers rate their agencies higher than agencies rate their clients. So I think that's because agencies have very high expectations of themselves and therefore everybody they work with. I don't think it's any indication. In fact, it's interesting that marketers in South Africa generally, 80% approximately, express that they are satisfied with their agencies. And in terms of performance, Mazda came through as one of the top in terms of performing client. And then in terms of best marketers to work with, no surprise again, Nando's, MTN and Chicken Licken.
Today, I'd just like to take 10 minutes of your time to share with you the exciting vision that we have for the progress of Assegai Awards, Assegais as we friendly call them, Assegai Awards in 2022. Last year, we actually conducted a survey for the Assegai Awards to understand, as participants, gala participants, winners, submissions, and jurors, how people, what people thought. And I'm going to share a bit of that information with you. And I want to thank you all for participating, for those who did in the survey. That brought us to 2022. And as David mentioned, he's just come back from the States, where he was invited to represent and showcase South Africa on the global stage. And I think it was a great opportunity for us to put forward the strong alliance that we have internationally. And we're going to see how that translates into our plans for 2022. But I want to ask you, what makes the Assegai Awards so different? And overwhelmingly, the words that come to mind is a celebratory event. You've said it's the most spectacular and entertaining event of them all. Great celebration that makes the hard work worthwhile. Glitz, glam, razzmatazz. And it basically celebrates our South Africanness. But also, most importantly, it's one of the only awards that rewards for business impact, effective marketing that delivers on return on investment. And that's the most important thing. So we are taking the Assegai Awards and putting them on the global stage with a bit of our local flavor. How are we going to achieve this? Well, as an entrant, what if we could automatically catapult you onto the global stage of the Echo Awards in 2023 with your Gold Assegai Awards? That's the plan we're going to make happen. And how we're going to do that is by refreshing the Assegai Awards to align with the global international Echo Awards and their standards, so that we can put South Africa on the international stage. This has started to happen in 2021. We already introduced international judges to judge our local work based on global standards. And in 2022, we're going to be aligning to the similar entry format, so it's easy submission throughout, and including even more international judges that we are borrowing from the Echo Awards. So that will be very exciting because we're getting that international and global point of view to judge our standard of excellence and efficacy. So how that's going to happen, what that means for us is there's going to be a change in the categories. We are looking at mirroring and refreshing the categories to mirror the Echo Awards. To start off, you'll be able to compete by sector or industry, by results that can be attributed to your channel of choice, also by your speciality or business objective. And also we've snuck in a few local ones over there. You'll see campaigns are not under millions of dollars, they're in rands. What's most important is the idea of shared value, where brands can show community support. And we're also introducing the aspect of celebrating our multi-language society and promoting that in South Africa. And for that, we are going to automatically honor the contributors to those winning awards. In terms of the entry process, we've tried to keep it as structured but as lenient as possible so you can showcase your work and make it shine, but with the limited amount of work. Over the years, I've been involved with the Assagais. I was trying to figure out how many years now, but I won't say that because I'm going to give my age away. As submitting as award winner, also award winner at the ECHO Awards, and a judge at the Assagai Awards. So I understand the pain and hard work that it takes to submit for these awards, and the money as well. It really is a big effort, and we would like to acknowledge that and try and make it as simple as possible for you as entrants and for the judges as well. So there's a good, in the entry process, it's important that there's a good balance in terms of structure and flexibility. So stage one, we would look for your contact information, and that's not only the entering team, but the primary team as well as those collaborating, because invariably agencies collaborate with other agencies and partners, and we want to celebrate that collaboration in this day and age. Entry details, obviously the usual names, dates, etc., marketing profile, type of country and data that you're using. The entry execution, going from situation analysis to objectives, the approach and execution, results, an optional ability to add supportive documentation so you can showcase your results and you don't have to try and fit it in so many words, which sometimes is very challenging. What I like best is coming up with the wow factor of your campaign. 70 maximum of 75 words that we can showcase on your behalf if you're a winner to promote what the wow factor of your campaign is. And then supporting files, your hero image, website, if that's applicable, and an optional case study, because that can also be quite a challenge going forward. Judging criteria remains similar to what we've been used to from the Assagai Awards, keeping our emphasis on results and return on investment. So who can enter? From South African campaigns and also extending it to the rest of Africa as well. So please take note, if you're a global agency, a global brand, please look at submitting your African entries as well. And the best news as a marketer is that this is all going to be in local prices. So not in dollars, but in rands, the entry fee. There's going to be a small increase as from last year, a 10% increase. So for DMA members, you're looking at about 2,300, and for non, 2,006. And the best news, I think, is that if you would like, you can pay an extra 1,000 rand if you want the opportunity to be entered into the Global ECHO Awards, if your award wins gold. And that's instead of paying $400, $400 to $600 to enter the ECHO Awards. So that is a big, big plus. So you can simultaneously, with one go, enter the ECHO Awards. When is all this going to happen? Timelines, we're looking at opening in June, entries open, they close in August. Judging will happen in September, October, and the award ceremony, as usual, the highlight of our year, in November. Without wasting any more time, I would like to urge you, we hope you are as excited as we are for the new, refreshed Assagai's Awards 2021. And please feel free to reach out, visit the website, assagaiawards.coza, and please feel free to reach out to us beforehand if you've got any questions. We'll obviously provide you with more information as we go along, and we're looking forward to seeing each and every one of you showcasing from small to big campaigns at the Assagai Awards.
First off, before I start, I would like to thank our hosts for having me on today to talk to you about an incredibly important project, and that is creating an accredited direct marketing Poppy Code of Conduct. Before I tell you about this initiative, let me introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth de Stadler. I'm the founding director of Novation Consulting, and we are the DMASA's resident Poppy experts on this project. So first off, I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page and we all know exactly what it is that I am talking about today. First off, let's just make sure that we all remember what POPI stands for, the Protection of Personal Information Act. It is a piece of legislation that came into effect last year and created the Office of the Information Regulator. I say flippantly on the slide what's new, because of course POPI isn't new anymore. It's been enforced now for a whole year, but actually this piece of legislation was drafted in 2009 for the most part, and was already signed into law in 2014. Right, so what really is new? What is it that we know now that we didn't know on the 30th of June last year before the Act came into effect? Well, we know that we've got a very active information regulator. That's always an open question. We also know that most of the complaints that the information regulator is receiving relates to direct marketing. And many of those relate to people who either feel like they weren't asked for their permission before they were contacted, or they asked not to be contacted and they were being contacted nonetheless. And this then brings us rapidly to what I want to discuss today. First off, I want to just very briefly outline what are the implications of the Protection of Personal Information Act for direct marketers, because there are some things that are quite confusing out there in this space. This then also forms the backbone and the topics that will be addressed in the DMASA POPI Code of Conduct for Direct Marketers. And that is what I want to just briefly talk to you about today. Right, so first off, this is a refresher for those of you who know POPI off by heart. I would urge you to also listen closely, because there are a lot of misguided interpretations about POPI out there, and it is probably a little bit different to what you think it is. Also, when we see reporting in the media about direct marketing and POPI, that reporting is also often fairly inaccurate. So I thought let's quickly run through what this legislation does and doesn't do. Right, so POPI prescribes rules on various topics. I tend to categorize it into sort of three broad categories. On the outside there, on that square that you're seeing on the slide now, sits confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's information security management. So yes, as direct marketers, we are responsible for the security of the information that we hold about leads, about prospective customers. Then on the inside, on the light blue square there are actually two topics, but it's made up of what we refer to often as the information lifecycle. Right? So you get a new lead that you collected or you created, you use that lead in order to market. You might even share that lead, let's say, with other direct marketers, and you might even use that information for different purposes in future. So you process it some more, and then eventually your relationship with this lead or prospect comes to an end. Either they become a customer or they don't, and then very hypothetically you might get rid of the information, and that is the information lifecycle. And so actually what POPI is about there on the inside is what information can we use for what purpose. And then the third topic, so if the first topic is information security and the second is privacy, the third is records management. So at the end of the relationship with the data subject or the prospect, what information do we keep? What do we get rid of? And if we keep it, what are we allowed to use that retained information for? Right. So that is POPI in a nutshell. Now, what does this mean for direct marketing? It means that POPI is about a great deal more than when do you need consent and whether that consent is an opt-in or an opt-out. Right. POPI is also about how you obtain information in the first place. So it does place some constraints on data brokering, on lead generation. Then it also limits cross-selling between organizations. Just because you are in the same group or you market similar products doesn't mean that you can just cross-sell information. Then it also means that you have to be transparent. So all of those people who complained to the information regulator had one thing in common. They were surprised that they were being contacted by that specific direct marketer, and that is an indication of non-compliance with POPI, because no one should be surprised about what information you have about them and what you use it for. Then when we talk about electronic communication, you do need consent for new customers. So in other words, people who have not bought the same or similar products or services from you before, if you want to send them electronic communication. Now, this is where things get really contentious. There are experts out there who believe that electronic communication includes telemarketing. I am not one of them. We, a couple of months ago, published a book, and the direct marketing chapter is freely available, and we will make sure that you have access to it. And in that book, we did a lot of research into how POPI was drafted, what was taken into account, why did they make certain decisions, including why did they decide to use the definition of electronic communication that they did. And we come to a conclusion that I feel very strongly about, that telemarketing is not electronic communication. So when you do telemarketing, not automated voice calls, but telemarketing, what is important to remember is that then you are subject to the Consumer Protection Act and you need an unsubscribe, right? But if it's electronic communication, such as AVMs, SMSs, emails, then you do need consent and opt-in. So telemarketing, opt-out, forms of electronic marketing, opt-in, right? Of course, the rules are somewhat more relaxed when it comes to your existing database of customers, and there are some exceptions which, if they apply, then you don't need to get consent. You only need to offer these existing customers an opportunity to object to receiving your marketing, so an unsubscribe. Then there is a provision in POPI that had everybody scared, called prior authorization. When you do linking, so when you use unique identifiers such as an ID number, for instance, to link different databases held by responsible parties together, you might need prior authorization from the information regulator. So this has implications for lead generation specifically. So there's that to keep an eye out for. And then lastly, there's always the question about what can you and can't you do with information that was collected before 1 July last year. And that is also an important conversation to have and to think about. It's just because you collected it before the POPI came into full effect doesn't mean that you can do whatever you like with it. Any continued processing, which might just be you're just storing it, if you're using it, you do need to comply with the legislation, and when that information was collected is actually not all that relevant at all. Right, so this brings me to the topic for the day, and that is, do we need, and we think we do, a code of conduct in terms of POPI for direct marketing? Right, and the first reason why we feel strongly that this is a worthwhile exercise and why the DMASA is embarking on it is because if you were to draw a picture of what POPI says about direct marketing, it would look something like this. It's not clear at all. If you speak to 5 direct marketers, you will get 5 different interpretations of the relevant provisions of POPI. And that is a problem because it means that we're not all playing on a level playing field. It means that we'll always have a very high volume of complaints and that we will therefore always be in the information regulators' crosshairs. Okay, so what is this code of conduct that I speak of? Well, it is a way to take control of the narrative. It's one of the things that we like to say. It is a way to ensure that all direct marketers in South Africa play by a mutually agreed set of rules. And what we are trying to prevent is not the fines. I know that many of you have received a lot of warnings about the 10 million rand fine. The problem with being non-compliant with POPI, or found to be non-compliant with POPI and having complaints against you, it's not the fine, it's the disruption. The information regulator can also tell you to stop processing, stop marketing. And so we desperately want to assist direct marketers to not get into that situation. Right, so what is this code of conduct that I talk about? So a code of conduct is created when an industry or different types of responsible parties or institutions decide to come together and create a code of conduct for a specific activity, in this case, direct marketing. What happens is you draft as an association and as an industry, you draft this code of conduct along with the assistance of specialists. And that code then gets submitted to the information regulator, who finally then decides whether to accredit that code of conduct or not. At the time that that code gets accredited, it becomes law. In other words, non-compliance with it is not an option, it's not voluntary, it is as binding on us as POPI is. And so why would we want to do that? And I thought that today is it's a good time just to talk about some of the many benefits of having a code of conduct. So first off, it provides certainty and a consistent interpretation of POPI across the industry. The aim is not to restate POPI, that doesn't help anybody, we can all read. The aim is to interpret POPI for the industry. In other words, to create a clear standard of what compliance for direct marketing looks like. It is also an opportunity to harmonize what POPI says with international best practice. And what that will do is it will make it easier for South African companies to participate in the global marketing economy, because, for instance, institutions that work in the European Union will feel safer to send their personal information or personal information of European citizens to South Africa. And that is a very big benefit, and is indeed one of the reasons why President Ramaphosa announced the effective date when he did. It also serves to level the playing field and make it easier to do business. If everybody has the same interpretation of what POPI compliance means, it means no one is benefiting from non-compliance. It also means that we can self-police amongst direct marketers, and that should raise the collective level of compliance and make it much easier to do business. It also means that we can ensure that there's a more balanced view of the right to privacy versus the right to do business. Right? POPI doesn't say that the right to privacy is inviolable. Right? And what I mean by that is people's privacy, we infringe on it every day for day-to-day activities. And what POPI actually says is that the right to privacy, which includes the right not to be disturbed, has to be balanced with businesses' right to do business. And we know that marketing is a crucial cog in our economy, and that direct marketing helps us reach audiences that otherwise would not have access to information about goods and services. And it's important that we make this point not just with the information regulator, but also with the public, who have certain misguided beliefs about what POPI says about direct marketing. Then we can agree on an interpretation and foster the relationship with the information regulator. We are all, the regulator included, grappling with what POPI does and does not mean in certain contexts. And this exercise of accrediting a code is a very valuable opportunity to ensure that our interpretation is the same as theirs. And because, again, that increases under that first bullet, that certainty that we are looking for. We will also create an independent panel of experts to mediate complaints. That is one of the prerequisites of accrediting a code. And this has the benefit of getting people who are knowledgeable on the law relating to direct marketing and how direct marketing works to adjudicate the complaints that the information regulator is receiving. We also don't have to worry about prior authorization anymore. If there is a code of conduct for a specific activity, the prior authorization requirement falls away, and I am sure that there are many organizations that will be relieved to be rid of it. And we also have two broader aims that we want to achieve in the coming months. First off, the aim has always been to professionalize the industry, and when we talk about direct marketing here, we talk from lead generation through to the marketer, or the brand sending the marketing. If we can all collectively have a high level of compliance, that will protect the reputation of the industry and perhaps stop some of the things that people are saying out in the open. And that brings me to the last point, and another broad ideal is to educate the public. Spam has a bad reputation. Many people are not aware of the important role that it plays. And many people are not aware that it has not been made illegal by POPI. POPI does not make any aspect of direct marketing illegal, yet there seems to be this widely held belief that that is the case. And that, ladies and gentlemen, in a nutshell, is why we are embarking on an exercise to take the current code and to ready it for accreditation. There will be extensive There will be extensive opportunities for consultation and to provide submissions on the Code of Conduct. So for those of you who are concerned that this is somehow going to happen in secret and one day you're just going to have to comply with this new document, that is not what will happen. There are at least 2 opportunities where the code gets published for comment, and we have to consider those comments very seriously. So you will be asked to make submissions, to join information sessions, and I implore you to do so, because together we can build a very strong code of conduct that can make it much easier for all of us to go about our business without having to worry about POPI too much. With that, I am going to call my discussion to a close, and once again, just thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about the Code of Conduct, and I hope to see you all at the events in future.
My question is, was there a reason that POPI never included direct mail? Because it was included in GDPR, and yet for POPI, it's excluded.
It's a very good question. I think it's one of the, I would say, couple of questions which baffles even the professionals. So it's part of the questions I also have to answer in practice. And it's one of those, I'm like, we don't know the thinking. Similar to our Form 4s and those lovely things that got included, we're not sure exactly why they excluded it. And I think that's part of the development of the legislation. When they start implementing it in practice, certain things like this are going to pop up, which we're going to see, is it necessary to include, isn't it necessary? But do remember, we still have the Consumer Protection Act, so when we talk about direct mail, putting in post-off boxes, so that was part of the thinking, could have been part of the thinking as well.
One of the things that we struggle with is where the intersect happens with audience building. So platforms that you can build audiences for using personal information. Yes, it's hash personal information, but what is the consent surrounding those aspects when the people actually give you the information? Like a platform like Facebook or DV360 or something like that, where you know who the person is and you know who you're going to communicate to, but it's not necessarily direct in the sense of that you're contacting them on their device, they're browsing a website.
So obviously there's different processing activities. If you're talking purely Section 69, which is our unsolicited electronic direct marketing, and you're talking platforms like Facebook, there is a differentiate. And again, I'm talking about what's happening internationally because we don't have that, hence the code. That's the type of stuff we're going to be clarifying in the code for South Africa, setting a benchmark here. But internationally, the differentiator on something like Facebook is when it hits your platform, your inbox. That would then be deemed unsolicited electronic direct marketing. If it's target audience marketing, it doesn't cover that. But obviously, you need to look at it. Doesn't mean POPI doesn't apply. You're dealing with personal information, and the whole spectrum of all the processing activities would still apply.
What I want to raise, and so you can just echo it, the regulator has asked for your pre-authentication before you touch data. What does that mean when we get to hold a code? That the regulator gives us the permission to be the industry holder of code. The prior authorization, what does it mean once we've been given that authority as the DMA for pre-authorizations? Because that's been a major quest of the credit bureaus and the small financiers and money lenders, because before they can touch data or change the state of data or connect databases to link data subjects for how would our code enhance that process?
Okay, so firstly, from a prior authorization perspective, there are specific rules when prior authorization applies. And I think the biggest thing to remember in those specific categories is that it might not be applicable in your organization. So if the purpose of the linking is for the original purpose of collection, for example, it isn't. But in many of our members' situation, it might be applicable. Something like the code would then mean you don't have to apply. If you fall under this code, you do not have to apply to the information regulator for prior authorization. So that's part of the benefits, and part of the code would then also establish practically, because similar to what Elizabeth mentioned, it's like, okay, great, but what does that mean for us and our environment? And it linked to your question as well. Something we struggle with, it's all nice and well, but when you delve into direct marketing, the practicalities of that, what that means on the floor, it gets very complicated. And that's what the code will aim to achieve. And linking to prior authorization, that would mean that one, you'll get clarity. Two, if you have to, you don't have to apply to the regulator, you subscribe to the code, and that would guide you on what to do.
So I run a field agent program called iGenerate. Now, prior to Poppy, when we created the model, it was to generate leads to sell. So after Poppy, we now became a marketing service company. So when we get the data, we partnered with the campaign, we get consent, and then the campaign holder is now using my brand as an affiliation to the lead. Now for me right now, it's an opt-in to market lead. Do I need to now take my opt-in to market lead and run it through the DMASA? Because these guys gave me direct permission to market. If I run it through the DMASA, they might have recorded a DNC to other products. So where does it leave me as a direct opt-in marketer in the field?
The quick answer is no, you wouldn't necessarily have to do it. However, it normally starts with how clearly and how transparent your T's and C's, and when you get that actual opt-in consent, I hear the word opt-in quite a lot in the industry, and my question is opt-in to what, for whom, for whatever, for how long, and that is the important thing to remember. So as best practice, some companies decide that if we have somebody that went so far to register on the DMA's national opt-out list, that the chances are very good they don't want to hear, and it also links to the type of questionnaire your field agent might fill in. If it was a very specific thing that I want this company checkers to phone me for this product, the chances are that they actually want to hear, and then you wouldn't necessarily want to opt out. But if it was a generic one, and I think that's the thing internally, a business decision you would be able to make to understand, would that person be surprised to hear from this company? It's kind of like the litmus test we talk about. Would they be surprised or no? I remember filling in this form, it was very transparent what they're going to do about my data.
Okay, so if we comply and we've got direct T's and C's, and we could go back and pull it out, then we don't need to.
Yes, if they were aware of the T's and C's, yes, and was plain understandable, and it's clear what they opted in, they actually gave consent for you to contact, yes, them for that purpose, then obviously you do not need to wash against the opt-out, because in this instance they gave you permission to phone them for that specific purpose.
I want to make a footnote comment this morning and thereby conclude this session. I'm here to do two things: to lobby you for your support on the code development. You've heard enough about the code this morning. We either as an industry are going to be masters of our own destiny or the subject of where we're going to end up. And you've got to choose, and I choose the first. I don't know where you stand. So we can make it part of our future and embrace it, and thereby professionalize our industry and our profession. Or we can actually be subject to whatever comes at us and be regulated through other means. So very important. I think this is a great opportunity through Poppy, yeah? I don't know what the right word is. I always say Poppy, but I hear you say Poppy, yeah? Nobody knows. Again, okay. Or we embrace it, and Poppy gives us that opportunity. And I think let's embrace the code, and please participate in all the actions to develop this code. You're going to be invited to participate, and again, it's your choice. If we participate, then we can co-shape our future. If we don't, you'll know where we will end up. So let's use the opportunity. It's fantastic in terms of the reason for existence of the DMSA, because it will actually make us more than just that collaborative and supportive forum. It will make us a self-regulatory forum as well. And I think that balance, David and the board will have to work out very carefully going forward, because it is a dual balance that will evolve as we go forward. So please participate. That's my first request. My second request is, as anything good in life, it comes at a cost. We would need some money. The estimated fees that we would need is about 2 million to roll this out. The development up front, and then obviously all the marketing and internalization actions that will follow afterwards. Now, as the DMSA, we go contrary to what our members actually do in their day-to-day living, which is push from a marketing strategy point of view. We prefer to pull first. So those of you with tax problems, whatever, Marina, our treasurer, is sitting right here. So on the way out, you can talk to her, and we can try and generate money through pull, by appealing to you to donate to us. That's what I mean by pull. But if the pull doesn't work, we unfortunately need to go into push, and we will push, because we need to raise the funds for everybody's benefit. And we really would welcome your support in terms of helping us to make this a financially viable and a sustainable initiative for us going forward. And I thank you very much for your time this morning.